Winter is coming. Hi, my name is John Henry Crawford, but you can call me JH. I'm probably one of those few people who hasn't ever seen a single episode of Game of Thrones. Games of Thrones? Game of Thrones. Games of Thrones. Haven't seen a single episode ever, but I still know that line because everybody knows that one line, winter is coming. With the changing of the seasons and the goodbye to summer and fall even, as a musician I really start to notice it. More specifically, my fingers really start to notice it. They don't move as fast in the morning and they just feel slower and less flexible as they are in the summer months. That leads us to our topic today, which is all about warming up. The how, the why, the when, the who, and the where. I don't know about the where, but the who is definitely you. So why bother warming up? Well, warming up is extremely important for musicians because it's the first line of defense against injury. It's helped me avoid things like tendonitis, carpal tunnel. Warming up is not just for the body though, it's also for the mind because warming up allows us to transition from more mundane activities to more mentally challenging activities like practicing. It all starts with blood flow and raising body temperature. When we sleep, our body temperature drops, so it's really imperative that we warm up sufficiently, especially if you're a morning practicer. When our body temperature is higher, our fingers, our hands, and our arms are all more limber and flexible, allowing us to practice more demanding material with less risk of injury. Also, our blood vessels become dilated, which helps deliver much needed nutrients and oxygen to every cell in our bodies. I'm not one of those people who has an elaborate warm-up routine with 15 different exercises for 3 minutes each. I like to keep it very simple and keep it to 3 simple steps. The first of those steps is to warm up the whole body. You can walk, run, sprint. You can do wall sits, squats. Some other options are to drink hot tea or coffee, or just some warm water if you don't like those things. You can also put on extra layers. This is one of my favorite ways to warm up in the winter because not only does it help you warm up, but it also helps you stay warm for long periods of time just by using your own natural body heat. When it's nice outside, I try to get a short walk in, but on very cold days, I'll take a hot shower and then sip on coffee while wearing this very cozy sweater. Sometimes I'll even sit in front of this heater until my skin reaches boiling point. After the first step is the second step, and that is activating the muscles and tendons. For this, I'll do some very simple warm-ups with just my hands and arms for maybe 5 minutes total. I don't really have names for these warm-ups, so I suppose we could just make some up on the spot here. The first one is wrist rotations. You just move your wrist in a circular motion. You might hear some popping sounds. That's totally normal. I don't really have a specific time for how long I do this. I might do it for a minute or two, and when I feel like changing directions, I'll change directions. But this just helps warm up the wrists. The wrists can be an especially vulnerable part of the body if we're not, using correct form, if we haven't warmed them up well. After that, I do arm circles. I basically just put my arms out and move them in circles. We're using the whole arm. It's not using fine motor skills with the fingers. It also gets some nice shoulder action, and then you can go the other direction. Next, I'll do shoulder circles, which are just kind of like shoulder shrugs, but in a circular motion. And this is really nice because as a cellist, and I could imagine as a violinist or pianist too, your shoulders are involved in a lot of what you're doing, whether or not you notice it. The next one I do is called rocking prayer hands. And it's very simple. You just rock back and forth with your fingers clasped. Don't go too far forward or backward, but I just like to do a nice gentle rock. This is really useful because it mimics supination and pronation that we often have to perform as musicians. You'll notice all of these warm-ups are motions, not static stretches like, doing this or that. They're active motions and they involve movement. I'm a firm believer that static stretching should be saved for after you're done practicing. I think that warming up is about getting blood flow, and there's also a lot of scientific research showing that static stretching, where you're just holding a particular pose, it does have a tendency to weaken the muscles short term. And when I practice, I want to be practicing at my absolute strongest. I don't want to be weakening my muscles or tendons right before I'm playing. So I like to save static stretching for after I've already put in a couple hours or when I'm done practicing altogether. This pre-practice heating up and warming up phase might take 10 or 15 minutes, but it's 15 minutes a day that will keep you injury-free for years to come. I'll admit some days I do forget to do this. Maybe I've got an early morning rehearsal, or I've been traveling and I get off a train or a plane and I have to immediately go to rehearsal and I don't have time to warm up. Even if you do this 6 days out of 7, You'll be protecting yourself from injury, and you'll probably be noticing a greater efficiency when you practice. Step 3 is what I like to call activating the neural system. Obviously, when we practice, there are neurons connecting our brain to our hands and our arms, and that neural connection is something that we need to warm up as well, rather than just jumping right into our toughest work. The way I do that is I start off with scales. Scales allow me to focus on fundamentals like sound projection, pitch, bow angle, bow contact point, bow distribution, all while preparing my body for the tougher work to come after the scales. Scales are also somewhat meditative, so sometimes I'll even close my eyes just to get a few more winks before the real tough work begins. After about 15 or 20 minutes of scales, I'll move on to Bach. Bach for me is a form of musical cleansing, because you can't get away with anything at Bach. Practicing Bach requires all sorts of components, from purity of sound to purity of intonation, clarity of articulation. Beyond that, it requires attention to voicing, to phrasing, to bass notes, to the architecture of the piece. Bach is very challenging, and thus it's a perfect primer for all other music. If I can practice Bach well, then I know that my mind is ready for anything, any challenge that is presented. Another thing to note is that our instruments may need to warm up as well. When you think of all the moving parts, strings, the bridge, tailpiece, sound post, pegs, the wood itself, these materials do act differently when they're at rest for many hours versus when they're being played and they're vibrating and resonating freely for hours on end. So your instrument will also thank you if you warm up properly. And that's it. 3 simple steps: warming up the whole body, activating the muscles and tendons, and activating the neural pathways. Do this consistently and you will be protecting yourself for a lifetime as a musician. Stay warm out there, and